Hi again, everybody. It is Victor, the over under guy for Mark Lawrence's PlaybookSports.com. We've got a little bit of a week 13 over under review and a little bit of preview as we commence and head into the month of December. Crunch time in the NFL in terms of the regular season. And of course, December, always a big month in terms of potential bad weather in pro football as well. In fact, I just was looking at the weather report for this weekend, and I noticed that the 5 games that will be played outdoors in the early Sunday kickoffs, it looks like all 5 of them will have some sort of a weather issue, either very, very high winds or extremely bad rain. We'll get into that in just a minute. But in the meantime, I'm sure you see the headline of the Totals Tip Sheet newsletter, this week's newsletter, where we say, welcome back to the overs in the NFL. Last week, 7 games with 55 or more points. And it was definitely a wild weekend from a totals perspective. Again, as I mentioned in the headline over here, 13 games last week. Remember, 6 teams had a bye. And more than half of those games, that would be 7 of them, saw a combined 55 or more. Obviously, the high scoring one, or the highest scoring one, was last Thursday in that Cowboys Seattle game, 76 total points in that one. And you want to talk bookends? The Monday night game was the second highest scoring game of the week. You saw 65 points in that Cincinnati Jacksonville Monday nighter. And of course, other high scoring games this week, 61 points in the San Francisco Philadelphia game and in the Detroit New Orleans game, 60 points in the Washington Miami game, 59 in the Colts Titans game, and finally 55 points in the Browns Rams game. And not only that, folks, but all 3 of the NFL primetime games, that's the night games, ended up going over the total for the first week all season long. Remember, we've been talking about these primetime games and the high percentage of unders all season long. But last week, all 3 of them ended up going over the total for the first time this season. Another interesting note, for the second week in a row, all of the late afternoon NFL games went over the total as well. Of course, the games that start at 4:05 Eastern or 4:25 Eastern. So now, in the last 2 weeks, these late afternoon NFL contests have been very high scoring, 7 overs, 0 unders, and in fact, they've averaged 47.3 points per game on the season compared to only 42 points per game in those Sunday 1 o'clock starts. So there you have it. And is the worm starting to turn? This is what a lot of over under bettors are going to be asking themselves after the results of the last 2 weeks, of course. And that would be 2 consecutive weeks now of more overs than unders. Now, again, you saw the headline here on page one about 7 games with 55 or more points. But even with that said, there was still enough low scoring games to keep the averages still in the mid 40s, as 5 out of those 13 games also had 40 or less combined points. You saw some of the ugly games, that 6-0 Chargers win over New England, the 13-8 Atlanta win over the Jets. So we still had a couple of very, very low scoring, ugly games that we've been used to seeing all season long. The official record for last week, 9 overs, 4 unders. Again, it was only the third weekend all season long in which there were more overs than unders. The average over under line last week was 42.4. Average combined points, 47.8. One of the higher scoring weeks of the season. So after 13 weeks now in the NFL, the year to date results now stand at 82 overs, 110 unders, one tie. That's still 57% of all games under the total. And the average combined points per game for the entire season, 43.4. So, despite that 9-4 over under record last week, the average over under line this week in week 14 is the lowest of the entire season. As we record our podcast on Wednesday, the average over under line in the NFL for this week is only 40.5 points. And that takes us to our next topic, which is basically how low can you possibly go? You already see the average line is 40.5 on the season. And there's still a handful of games that are really, really low, like the Thursday nighter between the Steelers and the Patriots, where the over underline is around 30 points. Or how about that Sunday early start game in Cleveland between the Browns and the Jacksonville Jaguars, with both teams down to second string quarterbacks or worse? The OU line on that one is down to about 31.5 points. So I did go into the database and check these really, really low over underlines. They're usually justified. NFL non division games with a low over underline of 32 or less points have gone 4 and 14 over under. That's four overs, 14 unders, 78% under the total in the past 20 seasons. Basically, the database is telling us that if you're going to play these ugly low over underline games, play them under. The line is that low for a reason. So again, if you're going to be thinking about the Patriots Steelers game on Thursday, either play the under or lay off. And the same thing for that Jaguars and their Browns week. One more thing in regards to this week in the NFL, and it's an important topic because 6 teams come in off their bye. Remember last week in the NFL, there were 6 teams with their bye week. It was the biggest bye week of the season, obviously by far. So it's the perfect time for us to do a little bit of a over under review for teams off their bye week. Already this season, NFL teams have gone 5, 18, and 1. That's 5 overs, 18 unders. That's 78% under the total. Teams coming in after their bye week this season. And there are 6 of those teams, like I mentioned. So we'll look to go low in those games involving those 6 teams: Baltimore Ravens, Buffalo Bills, Chicago Bears, Las Vegas Raiders, and Minnesota Vikings, who are in fact playing each other this week. And finally, the New York Giants on Monday Night Football. All those teams are off their bye. That's going to about do it for our Week 14 preview. Although a lot of people will say, before you go, how about a free play, maybe from King's best friend, and that would be my doggy Tuco, who brought home the bacon last week, and we're going to give him the ball again this week. And Tuco's free play for the podcast here is going to be a team total, and it's going to be in the Monday night game. Now, I will not be down here in South Florida on Monday night, and unfortunately, my wife and I will be up in Ohio dealing with some heartbreaking issues and duties. But with that said, our dog Tuco will still be holding fort down here in South Florida as our Miami Dolphins are hosting the Tennessee Titans on Monday Night Football. And Tuco's team total is for you to play the Dolphins to score over 30.5 points in this game against the Titans. It's a big time opportunity here on national TV to basically show the world how special this Dolphin track meet offense really is. It's a team down here that's got South Florida very, very excited. First time in a very, very long time. And again, Miami's one of only 2 teams in the NFL this season that are indeed averaging 32 or more points per game. And in fact, in their home games, the Dolphins are actually averaging 38.8. So you can add a touchdown to that 32. The Dolphins are averaging 39 points per game on their own at home this season. And what's got Tuco licking his chops is the fact that they will be playing one of the worst passing defenses in the entire league in the Tennessee Titans, who just allowed 312 passing yards to Gardner Minshew last week when Tennessee lost in overtime 31 to 28. In fact, the Titans, man oh man, they have struggled all season long against good quarterbacks like Trevor Lawrence, Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson, Justin Herbert, Baker Mayfield. Yes, we are aware that Miami has the highest team total on the entire Week 14 schedule, but our boy Tuco should have no problem getting to the 33 or more points from the Dolphins that he needs to cash a win on Monday night. So your free team total of the week from our boy Tuco is to play the Miami Dolphins over 30 and a half in the Monday night home game against the Tennessee Titans. So there you have it. That is our over under preview for last week's week 13. Our review for this week in NFL week 14. We will return to the Mark Lawrence podcast in just a minute or two. We'll be taking a pass next week. We'll talk to you in 2 weeks, and best of luck with all of your NFL week 14 action.